Uh, Greetings, everyone. Greetings, viewers over the world. This is the legal prophet, Legum Bakeri's candidate, the only man that originated from planet Jupiter to Mars, finally to Earth, the man that studied to be a summa cum laude and a sui generis, of course, with the help of God. I know it has been quite a very long period of time where we have not been engaging, and I think this is the period now we should resume because the requests have been quite a lot. You people have been on my case, and one of the most disturbing factor or the most disturbing feature in the law regarding to common law jurisdiction countries is basically the concept of equity and trusts. Of course, many people have always come up and said that, you know what, when you study the law and you meet a funny creature, equity and trusts, of course, you face a lot of challenges. But I will, of course, tell you that the law of equity and trusts is one of the easiest laws, if I can say, very easy, so long as you love, so long as you understand basically the concept. So in this episode, we're just going to look at the brief history of the law of equity and trusts in the world at large and in the country where I hail from, that is in the Ugandan jurisdiction. Now, I'm going to begin with equity. The first thing we should understand is that equity comes from the word equality. So equity basically is to do with fairness and justice. So when I talk of equity, you must know that when we talk of the sources of law in Uganda and in other jurisdictions, there is what we call common law and equity. So the question is, what is equity? And why do we study equity? So equity is a law that originated in the medieval England or in the medieval era of England or the UK. So you are developing, or it developed in the medieval era in the UK. You're going to find that when you trace the origin of equity, the origin of law in England, we shall see that in England, they were governed by the common law system. And also this common law system, for those that can tell, it developed from the King's Court, which most of us, or which most of the people know as the Curia Regis. So the King's Court, for those that have ever been to London, or those that have ever been to the UK, it was located in Westminster. So that is the court that administered common law. So with common law, usually, they looked at majorly customs of the people of the United Kingdom. Whether the custom was harsh, whether it was rigid, whether it was good, they applied it as it is. They applied it in black letters, that is in black and white, without changing. Even where you could see that no, time has phased, it is no longer reasonable. The people in common law courts, that is the Curia Regis, for them they applied it as it was. So this common law, as it went on to develop, you realize that by then, the Catholic Church was so much into influence in the politics or in the political dynamics of the various states by then. And when you look at the Catholic Church, it had originated from Rome. And when it originated from Rome, the language that was used by then, it was majorly Latin. Many people have always said, but why do lawyers speak Latin? Why do lawyers speak recips loquita, abodam crescit lignam cam crescerene quid, quid plantenta solo solo sedit? Principles like those are principles of common law. The principles that originated from England, majorly in the common law system. That in these courts, these people were so formal to the extent that if you could not even speak Latin, you had no locus, you had no right to be heard. So now what happens is simple. As time went on, as time passed, we see that by nature England or the UK was a monarchy which was headed or led by the king. And the king, of course, had a duty to ensure that everyone in the society was happy. So what they did, the kings, of course, they had people that used to go to fight battlefields to win, for example, conquering various states. So many of the people of the king, and when I talk of the king, I mean the knights. The knights are like the fighters, the warriors. These are people who used to go to battlefields to fight, but they used to leave their property with people that they have left home. So now when they left property with the people they left home, we see the issue or the doctrine of uses. That is majorly the factor that introduced the doctrine of trusts in the world. Common law system, in its rigidity, it had never seen that someone can entrust property with another person, that person called a trustee, for the benefit of the people this person wants to receive, just in case he's not around, he doesn't come back. For the common law system, they said, we don't know that. We have never seen such an arrangement, and therefore, they didn't recognize it. So, many people during the Middle Ages or the medieval era, they now began running to the king. Remember, the king had a duty to give justice. And now, when the complaints became too many to the king to handle, the king picked interest. And on picking interest, he had now to direct whoever approached him for justice for not being happy with the common law system. Actually, you'll find out that the common law system only had one remedy, and the remedy it had was damages. You'll find that not in all situations damages will be sufficient. So many people were not satisfied with the system of common law, if I can say. So they began running to the king for help. And now, what the king did in return was to ensure, now, you know what? Let me divert you. You go to a chancellor. Basically, the chancellor was like the head, or these were religious people. These were the people that were heading the Catholic religion. Remember, for those that will do, or for those that have done jurisprudence, you realize that religion and the law are inseparable. Actually, if I was given chance to justify between religion and the law, which one takes precedent? Personally, I would choose religion, because you'll see that almost everything is premised on the religion. So what the king now did in return was to direct whoever was complaining about the rigidity of common law to the king, to the chancellor. The chancellor, these were people that were well versed with canon law. When I talk of canon law, I mean religious law. You know the 10 commandments, those who believe in the Bible, that don't steal what and what. So these people, who I will call the chancellors, were not well versed with common law, that the law says this, Latin says this. No. For them, they knew that in such a situation, it is fair or it is not fair to do A, B, C, D. So, whoever now ran to these courts or to these people received justice. These people gave their decisions based on morality. Is it moral? Is it morally upright? They gave their decisions on fairness. In such a situation, is it fair? They looked at equity. Is it, you understand? There are situations where now they had to introduce remedies. Issues to do with specific performance. If you fail to carry out your obligation in the contract, they used to tell you, please do. Rescission. You have seen remedies of rescission. We shall look at them in the later episodes. Issues to do with injunctions were introduced. All of those were not existing in the common law system because common law systems only recognized the remedy of damages. So now, whenever the king diverted people to go to the chancellor to receive justice, remember the chancellor was known as the keeper of the king's conscience. Many people were jubilating. Whoever, like it was based on fairness, reasonableness, common sense. So now people began abandoning the common law courts. Remember, the common law courts were courts that were established under the law. But now people were no longer going there and decided to go to the to the chancellors for justice. Actually, at first, if I can tell you this, common law and the chancery courts, all these courts that were giving fairness, what and what, they were operating under the same system, in the same systems. Before that, at first, actually, I should tell you that the common law systems or the judges were not scared of equity. When it was starting, they were like, these ones are not well versed with the law. They are not going to leave the test of time. And to their surprise is that most of the people were running to equity courts or to the chancery, and they were receiving justice. And this actually annoyed the courts of common law. Conflict began. Actually, to make matters worse is that there are several litigants who used to go to common law courts and they didn't receive a remedy. For example, if you were unsuccessful party in the common law court, these people now used to run to the chancery courts. And now the chancery courts used to quash the decisions of common law. So this one again angered, annoyed the judges in common law. So they began conflicting that now whoever went to the chancery and failed to receive justice and ran to common law, also the common law courts used to quash. Basically, conflicts began arising. But it is important to note that various scholars have come in to basically equate or to basically talk about the common law and equity system, where there is even a saying that both common law and equity were like streams of water, rivers, flowing to the same direction. However, their waters would never mingle. That yes, they all aimed at giving justice, but they reached a time where they could not face each other. They were enemies. So that is basically what happened. So when the conflict arose, there was the issue of which one takes precedent in times of conflict. Because we saw people going to common law courts, in common law equity, conflicts had begun arising. And now it was a duty of the king to ensure that he resolves. Actually, many scholars have come in and said that the reason as to why equity developed was because of a Latin maxim, abodam crescit lignam cam crescere nequit. The abodam crescit lignam cam crescere nequit literally means that both common law was like or had become a dry wood which could no longer bear fruits to the people. So they had to introduce the concept of equity. So when I go back to the conflicts, which you have seen, issues of remedies, issues of formality, issues of who should take precedent in terms of conflict, we see that there was a major development that occurred in England. That is in the year 1615. In the year 1615, we see a decision which we call, or which we literally know as the Earl of the Oxford case. You cannot talk about the origin of equity and common law and you don't talk about the Earl of the Oxford case of 1615. In the Earl of the Oxford case, basically, it is a case now that resolved, you know what? Where there is conflict between common law and system, I mean common law and equity, which one takes precedent? So the Earl of the Oxford case made it clear that, you know what? Where there is conflict between equity and common law, equity shall take precedent. So I think you've now understood that where there is conflict between equity and common law, equity takes precedent. And the authority is the Earl of the Oxford case of 1615. So after that great initiative or introduction in regards to the conflict between common law and equity, we later see that these people moved on together smoothly. Of course, not happy, but there was a decision. We see that at one point in time later, these two systems of law, that is the common law system and the equity system, were later fused into one, which we call the fusion of equity and common law. They became one, or they could be applied concurrently. And that was manifested in the Judicature Acts of 1873 to 1875 in England. So the Judicature Act of 1873 to 1875 of England came into fuse these two systems, where it clearly specified that the chancery will give out equity. Then the common law courts will give out common law. However, the Supreme Court will apply these two laws concurrently. So the system of, the common law court, the Supreme Court was granted chance and power to apply these two laws concurrently. So basically, that is the simple history of equity and its development. Now, when we go to the Ugandan jurisdiction, how did it come about? With Uganda, you have to look at the year 1902. That is the reception clause. The reception clause introduced common law and equity in Uganda, because they were all sources of law in England. Uganda was colonized by England. Actually, at first it brought common law, equity, and statutes of general application. Then in the year 1962, there was the enactment of the Judicature Act, which still recognized common law, equity, and statutes of general application as good laws in Uganda. Then, in 1967, again there was another Judicature Act. This time it recognized common law, equity, but did not recognize statutes of general applications. Basically, statutes of general applications, these were statutes or acts of parliament that had been carried direct from England to Uganda. And some of them included the Law Reform Fire Metropolis Act. For those that will do tort liability for fire escape, you will see what it did or how it was of benefit. So they were all brought in Uganda, but in 67, Judicature Act, they were abolished. So now when we get to the 98, 96 Judicature Act of Uganda, previously before its amendment, I've not yet looked at the changes in the sections. Sections 15 and 14 recognize equity and common law as good sources of law. And as I speak today in Uganda, both common law and equity are recognized as sources of law. If they are not recognized as sources of law, where would you study these principles of common law, the Raylands versus Fletcher, among others? So basically, that is the simple introduction or a simple highlight of the sources of law, of the historical background of equity in Uganda. Thank you very much. Let's meet in the next episode. Of course, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. We meet.